I'm Clara, a 40-year-old French teacher. Life was pretty standard, filled with books, classes, and the occasional coffee with friends. I never expected it to take a dramatic turn until Mrs. Lefevre, an old friend of my mother's, decided to play matchmaker. One afternoon, while I was sipping tea at my mother's house, Mrs. Lefevre dropped by. She was a lively woman in her 60s, always with a story to tell or a plan up her sleeve. "Clara, dear, I have the perfect man for you," she exclaimed as she settled into the armchair. I chuckled, a bit skeptical. "Really, Mrs. Lefevre? And who might this perfect man be?" She leaned in, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "My son, David. He's a widower, a wonderful father to 2 teenagers. I think you two would hit it off." I hesitated, the idea of stepping into a ready-made family seemed daunting. "I don't know, Mrs. Lefevre. Stepping into a family, it's a lot." She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You're a warm, loving person. And David is such a caring man. Plus, the kids are lovely, really." My mother, who had been listening quietly, joined in. "Clara, it wouldn't hurt to meet him. You never know what life has in store for you." Encouraged by their enthusiasm, I agreed. A meeting was set up at a local cafe the following week. The day arrived, and I found myself sitting across from David, a man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. We talked about everything, from our jobs to our hobbies. He was a civil engineer and loved hiking, while I shared stories about my teaching and my love for French literature. "Your mom tells me you're a fantastic teacher," David said, smiling warmly. I blushed slightly. "Well, I love my job. Teaching French is my passion. And your mom mentioned you're quite the hiker." He laughed. "Yeah, when I get the chance. But with Sophie and Max, my free time is usually spent on more family-oriented activities." The way he spoke about his children, Sophie and Max, was endearing. They were 14 and 12, stepping into the challenging teenage years. "We all have our hands full with teenagers, don't we?" I joked, thinking of my rowdy students. By the time we finished our coffees, I felt a connection with David, a sense of understanding and mutual respect. We agreed to meet again, and I found myself looking forward to it. After David and I got married, life settled into a comfortable routine that I cherished deeply. The addition of Sophie and Max, David's children, into my life was a source of joy, filling a gap I didn't know existed. I loved being a part of their lives, even though they never called me Mom. The bond we shared was unique and special in its own way. One lazy Sunday afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen, baking cookies with Sophie. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of chocolate and vanilla. "Clara, do you think these cookies will turn out okay? I'm not very good at this," Sophie said, a hint of doubt in her voice as she mixed the dough. I smiled at her. "You're doing great, Sophie. Baking is like learning a new language, it takes a little practice, but you'll get the hang of it." Sophie beamed, her confidence boosted. "Thanks, Clara. It's fun baking with you." Just then, Max bounded into the kitchen, his energy almost palpable. "What's cooking, ladies? It smells awesome." "We're making cookies. Want to help us with the decorations later?" I asked, knowing his creative flair would add a fun element to our baking. Max nodded enthusiastically. "Sure. I'll make them look super cool." The afternoon passed with laughter and light-hearted banter. It was moments like these that made our house a home. Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner, the conversation turned to our plans for the upcoming holiday. "How about we go hiking this year? There are some great trails not far from here," David suggested, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Sophie seemed intrigued. "Can we camp overnight? I've always wanted to try that." Max chimed in, "Yeah, and maybe do some fishing too." I watched the animated discussion, feeling a warm sense of belonging. "That sounds like a great idea. A little adventure for the family," I added. David reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "Thanks for being so open to this, Clara. I know outdoor stuff isn't really your thing." I laughed. "Well, I might not be the outdoorsy type, but I'm definitely up for new experiences. Especially with you all." The dinner continued with plans and ideas being tossed around, each of us contributing to the holiday itinerary. It was a simple meal, but the warmth and love that filled the room made it memorable. That night, as David and I cleaned up the kitchen, he turned to me, his expression soft. "Clara, I just want to say, you've been amazing with the kids. They've really opened up to you." I leaned against the counter, a contented sigh escaping my lips. "I love them, David. They're great kids, and I just want to be there for them, in whatever way they need." He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. In that embrace, I felt the strength of our family bond. It was a bond that had grown over shared experiences, mutual respect, and love. I went to bed that night feeling grateful and fulfilled. Shortly after our wedding, David's mother, Mrs. Lefevre, suffered a stroke that left her paralyzed. In the blink of an eye, our lives changed drastically. I took on the responsibility of caring for her, balancing this new role with my job as a French teacher and managing household chores. These were challenging times, but I found solace in providing comfort to someone who had welcomed me with open arms into their family. Years passed, and Mrs. Lefevre's health continued to decline. Then, one fateful morning, she passed away. The loss hit me harder than I expected. She had become like a second mother to me. The day after her passing, the house was quiet, an eerie calm that felt unnatural. I was in the kitchen, lost in my thoughts, when David and the kids came in. Their expressions were solemn, but there was a strange undercurrent of anticipation in their voices. "Mom's lawyer will be here this afternoon to discuss the will," David said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Sophie chimed in, her tone surprisingly light. "I wonder what Grandma left for us. She always said she had some savings aside." I was taken aback by their conversation. Shouldn't we be focusing on arranging a proper service for her? She was a big part of this family. David shrugged. "We'll take care of that, but there's no harm in looking ahead, Clara. Mom would have wanted us to." As the day progressed, their excitement over the inheritance became more apparent. It was as though Mrs. Lefevre's passing was merely a pathway to financial gain. I couldn't help but feel disturbed by this blatant display of greed. That evening, after the lawyer's visit, David and the kids gathered in the living room, eagerly discussing the inheritance. I stood at the doorway, listening to them. "So, we're getting a good amount, then?" Max asked, his eyes gleaming. David nodded. "Yes, enough to make some significant changes around here." Sophie's laughter filled the room. "Finally, I can get that new laptop I wanted." I stepped into the room, unable to contain my disappointment. "Is this really what's important right now? Your mother just passed away." David looked at me, his expression cold. "Clara, you wouldn't understand. This is family stuff." I felt a sting at his words. "I cared for your mother for years, David. How can you say I wouldn't understand?" He scoffed, turning away. "Just because you looked after her doesn't mean you're entitled to anything. You did what any decent person would do." In the weeks that followed, David and the kids became increasingly distant and dismissive. Their attitude towards me changed from indifference to outright rudeness. David's remarks became more cutting, and the children, following his lead, treated me with a lack of respect that I had never experienced before. One evening, as I was setting the dinner table, David walked in, his face stern. "Clara, you need to step up your game around here. The house has been a mess lately. I looked around, bewildered. The house was as tidy as it always was. I've been doing my best, David. I don't understand what's changed. He shrugged, his voice harsh. Just saying, you could do better. After all, it's not like you're contributing much else around here. I felt a lump form in my throat. The man I had married, the family I had embraced, were now treating me like an outsider, an unwelcome burden. The shift in my family's demeanor after Mrs. Lefebvre's passing wasn't gradual, but a sudden plunge into a cold, unfeeling world. David and the children's behavior towards me transformed overnight, from distant to openly hostile. Every day brought a new barrage of insults and nagging, and I was treated less like a family member and more like an unwelcome servant. One particularly harsh evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, David entered the kitchen, his face twisted in a sneer. "Clara, why is dinner not ready yet? You really can't do anything right, can you?" Stunned by his harsh tone, I replied, trying to keep my composure, "I'm doing the best I can, David. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes." He scoffed, looking around with disdain. "You know, I only tolerated you because you were useful, taking care of my mother and the kids. But now? You're just a burden." His words cut through me like a knife. I stood there, the plates in my hand feeling heavier than ever. Sophie walked in, her voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah, Clara, you should be grateful we even let you stay here. You're just a scary, old, and useless woman." Max, not to be outdone by his sister, chimed in mockingly, "Yeah, who would want you around? You're like a ghost haunting this house." Every word was a blow to my spirit. I had dedicated years of my life to this family, caring for them as my own, only to be reduced to this pitiful state. I served dinner in silence, their cruel laughter and jibes echoing around me. That night, as I lay in my bed, the day's events replayed in my mind. David's cruel declaration that I was nothing more than a now useless caretaker, Sophie's and Max's hurtful comments. It all hammered home the painful reality that the family I had loved and cared for saw me as nothing more than an expendable servant. The following days were no better. Every task I did was met with criticism and disdain. I was constantly reminded of my place in the household, a place that seemed to have no respect or kindness. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the living room, David walked in with a look of annoyance. "Clara, have you seen my blue tie? I can't seem to find it anywhere." "I washed and hung it in your closet yesterday, David," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, it's not there now. Can't you do anything right? You're just taking up space in this house," he snapped, storming off. I finished my cleaning, each sweep of the broom feeling heavier with the burden of his words. The home I once cherished now felt like a prison, filled with contempt and scorn. Living in a constant state of belittlement and disrespect had taken its toll on me. Each day in David's house was a battle against his and the children's growing cruelty. I began to contemplate the painful decision of leaving, but my worsening leg pain and the lack of financial resources made me feel trapped. One chilly morning, as I limped around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, David stormed in, his face twisted in annoyance. "Clara, why is everything taking so long? You're moving like a snail." I tried to hide my pain. "My legs aren't what they used to be, David. I'm moving as fast as I can." He rolled his eyes. "Excuses, always excuses. You're just a burden, you know that?" The words stung, but I remained silent, focusing on setting the breakfast table. Sophie and Max entered the kitchen, their expressions mirroring their father's impatience. "Ugh, why do we always have to wait for Clara? She's useless," Sophie muttered, sitting down with a huff. Max didn't bother to hide his disdain. "Yeah, if she can't even make breakfast properly, what good is she?" I served them breakfast, each word from them like a dagger to my heart. As they ate, I sat down at the far end of the table, my appetite gone. After breakfast, I retreated to my room, the pain in my legs growing with each step. The lack of empathy and the constant insults from David and the kids were unbearable. I sat on the edge of my bed, the reality of my situation sinking in. I needed to leave, but I was scared and unsure of how to proceed. Later that day, I mustered the courage to speak to David. I found him in the living room, reading a newspaper. "David, can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He glanced up, his expression one of irritation. "What is it now, Clara?" "I've been thinking, maybe it's best if I leave. I don't feel welcome here anymore," I said, my voice shaking. David looked at me, a smirk forming on his lips. "Leave? And go where? You have no money, no place to go. Your mother died without leaving you anything to inherit. You're stuck here, Clara, whether you like it or not." His words were a harsh reminder of my dire situation. I felt a sense of despair wash over me. He was right, I had nowhere to go. My job as a teacher had been my only source of income, and with my leg condition, I couldn't even do that anymore. I had to resign from school. It was a bitter, but the only right decision. The following days were a blur of household chores, nagging, and insults. David and the kids treated me with utter disregard, their words and actions reinforcing the painful truth that I was no longer a part of this family, but a mere inconvenience to them. As I struggled with my pain and loneliness, I began to secretly plan my escape. I started saving whatever little money I could, hiding it away for the day I could finally leave. The thought of freedom, of being away from the constant belittling and disrespect, was the only thing that kept me going. One afternoon, while David and the kids were out, I sat at my old laptop, nursing my aching legs. Browsing aimlessly, I discovered a website for online tutoring. A thought struck me: could I leverage my skills as a French teacher in a new, virtual setting? Hesitant, but driven by a newfound purpose, I set up a profile on the site. "Experienced French teacher available for online lessons," I typed, my heart racing with both nervousness and excitement. The next few days were a whirlwind. To my amazement, requests for lessons began to pour in. My afternoons, once filled with loneliness and despair, were now occupied with teaching French to eager students from around the world. One day, as I finished a lesson, Sophie walked in, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the laptop. "What are you doing?" she asked suspiciously. "I'm teaching French online." "It's something I'm good at," I replied, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. She scoffed. "As if anyone would want to learn from you." I ignored her remark, feeling a sense of pride in my small, but significant accomplishment. As weeks turned into months, my reputation as an online French tutor grew. I started earning enough to entertain the idea of independence, of a life away from the constant degradation I faced at home. The days that followed saw me juggling my newfound career with the household chores. Despite the physical pain and the emotional drain of living in a hostile environment, I found solace and strength in my teaching. Each lesson I gave was a step closer to freedom, a reminder that I was capable, valuable, and deserving of respect. The tension in the house reached its zenith the evening David announced his promotion at work. That night at dinner, the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. David, Sophie, and Max were unusually chatty, their voices laced with a smug satisfaction that sent a chill down my spine. As I served dinner, trying to ignore the dull ache in my legs, David cleared his throat, ready to make his announcement. "I've got some news. I got a promotion at work. With it, I've bought a new house. Bigger, better, and it suits our new status." Sophie clapped her hands in delight. "That's amazing, Dad. When do we move?" David's gaze shifted to me, cold and calculating. "We will be moving soon. But Clara won't be joining us." The room went silent. I looked up, my heart sinking. What do you mean, David? He smirked, his words cutting through the air like a knife. You're not coming, Clara. You don't belong in that part of our lives. You were useful once, but not anymore. Sophie joined in, her voice dripping with disdain. Yeah, Clara. You're just an old, limping woman. What use would you be in our new house? Max laughed, adding insult to injury. You should be grateful we let you stay here this long. I stood there, the plates in my hands trembling. The pain of their words was sharper than any physical ache I had ever felt. David slid the divorce papers across the table to me. I think it's best we part ways. You can stay here until the house is sold. Numb, I picked up the papers. My hands were shaking as I signed them. There was no point in arguing or pleading. The people I had once called family had shown their true colors, and they were ugly and cruel. The next morning, I began to put my plan into action. While David and the kids were out, I packed my belongings. Each item I placed in the suitcase was a step towards my freedom. When David and the kids returned, they found me at the door, suitcase in hand. David's expression was one of surprise and confusion. What are you doing, Clara? He asked, his voice laced with a hint of concern. I straightened my back, facing them with a newfound strength. I'm leaving, David. I will not stay here and be treated like a worthless burden. David scoffed. Where will you go? You have nothing. I smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. I have more than you think. I have my dignity, my skills, and I have plans. You will not see me begging. In my rented apartment, a modest but serene space, I was rebuilding my life, one online French lesson at a time. The freedom and tranquility here were in stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere I had escaped from. One evening, as I was reviewing lesson plans, my phone erupted with the frantic ringing of a call from David. His voice, laced with panic and anger, filled the room. Clara, what the hell have you done? Sending those recordings to my boss? Do you have any idea what you've caused? He bellowed, the sound of his fury resonating through the phone. I leaned back in my chair, a smirk playing on my lips. Oh, you mean the recordings of all the lovely things you and the kids said to me? Yes, I did send them. In the background, I could hear the unmistakable cries of Max and Sophie. Tell her to fix this, Dad. She's ruined everything. David's voice cracked with desperation. Clara, please. Because of those recordings, I'd been demoted. I can't afford the mortgage on the new house. You have to help us. The sounds of their pleading were music to my ears. Help you? After the way you all treated me? You made your bed, David. Now lie in it. His voice rose to a near scream. You can't do this to us. We're your family. I laughed, a deep, hearty sound that felt liberating. Family? No, family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. You and your kids were nothing but cruel and abusive. This is your karma, David. Sophie's voice cut through, shrill and pleading. Clara, please. We didn't mean any of it. We'll change, I swear. Max joined in, his voice laced with fear. Yeah, Clara, please. We're sorry. We need you. I stood up, pacing the room as I replied, sorry? Your words and actions broke me. But guess what? I picked up the pieces and put myself back together. Without you, I owe you nothing. David's voice was a mix of rage and helplessness. You're going to let us lose everything? I stopped pacing, standing tall and proud. Yes, David, I am. You and the kids have made your bed, and now you get to sleep in it. Goodbye. I hung up the phone, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. I had stood up to them, not with malice, but with the strength they never thought I had. Over the following weeks, I heard from mutual friends that David and the kids were struggling. They couldn't pay the mortgage, and the bank had taken over the house. They were forced to move into a small rented apartment, and both Sophie and Max had to take up jobs to help make ends meet. As for me, my online tutoring was flourishing. I was saving money, not just for my day-to-day needs, but for a house of my own. A place where I could live in peace, away from the shadows of my past.